Okay, so this next stanza is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Stanza number 5, again, we have a return to the couplet. And here, Heaney starts with an exclamation, which is by God. Obviously, exclamations denote surprise. The old man could handle a spade just like his old man. So you get this idea of kind of like a generational passing down of like this physical activity from one to another. Whereas Heaney doesn't inherit that ability and he doesn't inherit that physicality. Instead, he's a writer. I don't know how you would interpret this. I would suggest that perhaps there's a sense of resentment there, or the fact that he feels slightly emasculated because he's not the same as them. But that's just my interpretation. You might have some different ideas about that. So it's referring to obviously his father and then his grandfather. Okay. Man issues. And then again we have a shift, okay, because we know that this next stanza starts by talking about his grandfather, and the shift is to even further back in time, and it's revisiting and exploring the memories of his grandfather, who's digging for something called peat. Now, don't worry if you don't know what this is. Peat is it's a fuel that is used and it's dug from the earth, and it would be used for kind of fires and for fuel in the home, in a lot of rural communities in Ireland. So where it talks about him cutting turf, it's not just him cutting through the ground, it's him digging for this fuel. So arguably, I mean, these two men are digging for different things. You have one digging for food and you have one digging for fuel, but both of those are kind of like essential things that support obviously their families and their livelihoods and things like that. Also, don't be put off by the word bog. A bog is a freshwater, an inland freshwater. What is a bog?
Wetland.
It's a wetland. I don't really know how to describe it. It's a place that's kind of muddy and dirty, and you would have kind of. I tried to describe it to you guys the other day, but I'm not entirely sure I did a good job. Maybe Google image that.
It accumulates a deposit of plant material, primarily mosses.
Yeah, there you go. So, that's where he's doing this digging. I only highlighted this adverb here. Actually, this is a nice little adverbial phrase. Because again, it's about placing the poem in a specific time and place, and the adverb once obviously helps to do that, but also we get more of an idea here that Heaney's a child, right? Obviously. Here I've highlighted this because again you have repetition of like two different verbs. You've got nicking and slicing and heaving. So you've got that whole like physical activity emphasized again. That's quite obvious, I think, to analyze in terms of repetition. And again, we have the repetition of this word, which comes up again over and over. Yes, here it is not in past tense, it's actually in present. But it's as though then in that case that it's like ongoing, as though this activity is something that went on and on for them. The second to last, the penultimate stanza, I thought this was quite interesting. When we looked at O'Brien, I don't know if you guys can remember, we talked about that idea of synesthesia, but I don't know if you can remember. but the combining of two senses, like when a writer uses sense imagery. So in this case you have like touch or feeling, and you have smell. I thought that that was quite an interesting description there. I also read about it as well. Like, there's some kind of irony in that phrase, because what he's digging for will be used to make them warm, like the idea of it being used for fuel. But you might have some different ideas about that as well. I just think it's an interesting couple of words to look at. Here again we go back to sound imagery, which makes it obviously quite vivid. Alliteration. I think that you guys could probably analyze some of this stuff by yourselves. Okay. This is when like the real message of the poem kicks in. But I've no spade to follow men like them. I definitely think have a think about what you what connotations you think that has. I think it's referring to him being kind of like emasculated, but at the same time, like his tools, in terms of tools, it's like his pen is what empowers him and allows him to write and things like that. So I don't know, I would explore that idea, but it's interesting that that comes right at the end of the poem, and the final line of the poem links to that as well. The first two lines of the final stanza are a shift back to present tense, and also they're a reference back to the start of the poem. But we also have this declarative statement at the end, and it's a statement of intent, isn't it? It's saying what he will do, and he's suggesting that he will use his pen as his kind of tool. I mean, you could think about that in terms of like provision, like his pen provides him livelihood as a writer, but also if you remember that context we were talking about, you could also think about his writing in terms of like him reclaiming the voice of the Irish people, or like especially in terms of like post-colonial writing, like is he reclaiming the voice and like responding and like giving a voice to this country and like speaking about their roots and things like that. I think that there's potentially quite a lot that you could look at there. Okay, yeah, so see what you can do with that poem. I would definitely suggest going through it again after you've listened to this, just in case you pick out any other things as well. But hopefully that would give you kind of a few directions to go in if you were analysing this during the IOC. Okay, bye.